I'm John Strong.
I'm Parker Mitchell.
And I'm Hunter Rulo. Our topic is internet regulation, and we are now open for questions.
What are we regulating on the internet, gentlemen? What
If-
should we be regulating?
Our opinion is that we all have the same views that the government should not regulate any of our access to any internet domain, and that anything on the internet should be allowed to be seen.
Anything?
Within reason, as long as it does not break the law.
Who determines what that is? And the scope of what that might be?
Normally it's government. Normally it should be regulated by the Senate and the President himself.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say that we have set up two agencies, the FCC and the FTC, which both deal with censorship on the internet and what can be seen and what cannot, and how ISPs can deal with the internet. So, but yeah, the FCC and the FCC are the two that decide the regulations and censorship on the internet.
Well, since the internet is obviously international in scope, and the two organizations you just mentioned were U.S., so does that mean that if a resource is across in Canada or Mexico, then who regulates that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I would assume, I would guess that it would be the FCC because it's coming into our territory, but I'm not sure.
The FCC is the what? Federal.
The Federal Communications.
Okay. That's our federal.
Is
Not,
what-
that's our federal, not global, though, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So then who would regulate something between Mexico and Brazil?
I guess that's
it would be between those two countries. And when we're saying internet regulation, we're talking about within, as the American people. We're not talking about any other countries. If information comes into the United States, then it falls under the jurisdiction of the FCC.
Is there any other organizations that have been around since the inception of the internet that kind of control that as well?
well, there used to be the Federal Radio Commission, I think the FRC, which was replaced by the FCC or FCC when the internet came along and radio wasn't the main thing. So that is another one, but that one is irrelevant now.
Do any of you know what ICANN is?
I do not.
No,
I don't.
ICANN, the International Consortium to Assign Names and Numbers. It's the company or the entity that keeps me from buying eBay.com if somebody else already has eBay.com, because we had 1,000 eBay.coms, that may be a little bit of a problem. So they're the International Consortium for Assigning Names and Numbers. They regulate IP addresses, they regulate web addresses, domain names, those sorts of things. So there are international bodies out there that are regulating this because it's an international resource, right?
yeah.
I think Mr. Hall was asking if you knew about any other international bodies that govern. That was the one you were thinking about? Okay.
If you're talking about government, how do you feel about net neutrality?
For net neutrality, where it's like the government and the service providers treat it like all the data the same and equal, I feel like that we should keep net neutrality and we should keep net neutrality as it is.
I'm just an IT guy. Can somebody explain net neutrality to me? It sounds good. It's the net and it's neutral, but I don't know what that is.
I can say a lot about net neutrality. So basically, what it is trying to do currently is, well, I guess it started back in 1934 with the Communications Act of 1934, back before the internet, and when radio was first coming out, and it was mostly dealt with radio. And then many years later, in 1996, there's the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which when the internet was first emerging, and they were like, we need to update how we treat the internet. So those two acts came in place, and they dealt with physical, like telephone and telecommunications, I guess. But that was before like wireless internet was really big, before the mobile internet like exploded, I guess. And so net neutrality, what it does is, since new things have come up, like broadband, since then, net neutrality is trying to take those rules that were set up for radio and like phones or the phone networks and apply it to broadband internet. And so what that would entail is that internet service providers, ISPs, would not be able to have like a website or a company pay them to give their website faster speeds and throttle other websites. And that's kind of the gist of it.
Can you talk to us with net neutrality? Are there any prominent figures or companies that are in favor of net neutrality or against net neutrality? Maybe in recent news?
Yeah. Let's see. The current chairman of the FCC is actually against net neutrality. His name is Ajit Pai, and he was recently nominated by Donald Trump. And he is trying to put an end or roll back net neutrality. It was passed in 2015 under the Obama administration, and he is trying to undo what was done. And he's already undone 2 rules from net neutrality. First one being that all TVs and radio stations have to keep a paper copy of their viewers and listeners and make them publicly available. He changed it to that they do not have to have a paper copy and instead have an electronic copy. And that's a good example of how net neutrality is kind of inefficient, because it's taking current technologies and applying old laws that were set up for radio and TV and applying it to this new technology. And most of the people against net neutrality don't think that that should be applied because they're different. And then another thing that Ajit Pai has changed is that he eliminated the rule that companies have to maintain and allow public inspection of location of a cable system's principal headed, and he changed it to only the FCC TV stations, and certain companies can request that information. There's no longer public information. So he's already done some to roll back what was decided in
So
neutrality.
John, you said this is the head at the FCC?
Yeah, he's the
That is
chairman.
working to roll back because he's not in favor of net neutrality, right? So
Yes.
he doesn't like net neutrality, he wants to roll it back, and you've talked about the steps that he's taking to do that. Parker or Hunter, do you know why he's against it? Has he given any reasons? Or he just thinks net neutrality is bad for some reason?
I personally do not know.
John, do you know any reasons why he in particular is against this, like what he thinks it's inhibiting or not allowing?
He thinks it gives too much. He thinks he gives the FCC too many regulating powers. He just thinks that it needs too much, and he thinks that, like I stated before, that it's laws and regulations meant for a technology of the past decade, and it should not be applied to new technology.
This is the head of a government entity that wants to have less power? That may be unheard of. Wow. Interesting. All right.
Other than the chairman of the FCC, can you come up with any other figures that have any positions on net neutrality?
I know of one, I think Mitchell O'Reilly, I think it's him. He is, I'm not exactly sure his position, but he works in the government and he's a politician. He's very prominently against net neutrality, and he works with Ajit Pai a lot, and he has the same stances.
Are there any people that are in favor of net neutrality that we would be aware of? Or should we just trust our chairperson to take care of us?
I'm not sure who the specific people for net neutrality.
Okay.
Let's take you down a hypothetical then. Mr. Strunk has pointed out very aptly that net neutrality has to deal with the not allowing service providers to basically monkey with the speeds or the services that they provide to give advantages to one part of the internet over the other part, whether that's a website or a service or promote something over something else. Can we think of any entities out there that may go, it'd be a really good idea if something could get promoted over something else, if something was easily accessible or faster to access than other parts of things that are on the internet? This It's not in your notes, but just kind of go along with it on this
Can you
one.
read that for me? I'm sorry. I didn't
Okay,
fully grasp
so Mr. Strunk has pointed out that net neutrality is basically prohibiting internet service providers from throttling back certain speeds, certain sections, certain websites, certain things
Yeah.
in favor of other things. So they could make it easier for you to get to this website and make it harder for you to get to that website, just boiling it down to the base, okay? Can we think of anything, to Mr. Small's question, can we think of any entities that might think it'd be a really good idea if I could get to this website faster, if people could get to that website faster, easier, better, and not to this other website faster, easier, better? Can we think of any entities that would be interested in that?
I think a good thing that could be seen as would be with Bing and Google.
Okay.
I think that Bing would prefer that other people view them more than people view Google.
Okay.
But clearly, it could go both ways because Google could want more people than Bing.
Sure.
Should run traffic through that internet website and that search engine.
So browsers, and we've
Yeah.
heard that with Google before about people paying to have their ads come up higher or their websites come up higher in their search results, right? That's
Yeah.
been a big thing in the news. Who else might be interested in having this website easier to access, faster to access than this other website that maybe they don't like or aren't aligned with?
You could have news companies,
News
like
companies
the Wall
could do
Street
it.
Journal and
Certainly.
the New Yorker, both newspaper resources. One could want more views than the other one, and they're both trying to generate ad revenue because when you put it on your website, it generates more revenue for them. So there would be a competition between the two to see who could pay more to get more money.
So to your point, if I'm a commercial entity of any type,
Yeah.
whether I'm print advertiser or anything else, I could be Walmart, I could be Joe's Crab Shack, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I might barely be interested in not having net neutrality so that my product, my website, my whatever could get to faster, better than my competition, right?
Yeah.
Very good.
So all three of you said, or I think you mentioned that you are in favor of net neutrality?
Yes.
Okay, so let me throw this out. Let's hypothetically say I have $1 billion, very hypothetically, and I want to expand if we could get fiber optics in Lexington, how fast would that be? But I have to be able to get a return on that investment, right? So where would I get the money on and the return on my investment if I have to stick with I can't charge other people? Do you think that might be a viable reason to?
I'm actually not in favor of it for that reason exactly. It's a simple economics concept that if the government tries to apply price caps or price floors to any resource in the open market, then generally it does not work out too well. I mean, there's lots of examples of when the government has like capped the prices of like gas or something like that, and it's caused a plethora of problems. I think that we have an open market and the price will regulate itself. I don't think we need the government to step in and say that they can't sell their internet or their speeds for that much money. I mean, if people are willing to pay that, then I don't see why they can't pay that to have their internet faster for their website. And like you said, it will help the ISPs put more infrastructure in and build more because they have a greater income.
Okay, so you do feel that that would help if they didn't have the regulation?
Yes.
I think that could go both ways with it being good or bad, because you could have a company like Amazon who can just control the entire arena that it's playing in, and you could have a smaller company that could offer better service, better products, and yet they could be dwarfed out by Amazon. They could not receive as much business just because Amazon has more money and they can pay more. I think that's a double-edged blade there.
All right, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. A lot of time we're talking about regulation. What's the relationship between when the government wants to regulate and the government wants to censorship or wants to censor content? What do you think that looks like, Mr. Mitchell?
Like, with censoring, they're just mainly making sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't be doing. Like, not trying to,
Who says I shouldn't be doing?
like the government. like whatever's against the laws. Like you shouldn't be trying to go on there selling drugs or anything. Pirate movies and just like regulate. They're just wanting to make sure, like, see everything we're trying to do. So.
Mr. Hunter, so obviously this conversation is very U.S. based, but obviously we're only a small part of everything.
Yes.
What does censorship look like in other countries?
The main one I pulled from was China because from everything that my research showed, I didn't like the main countries that I got internet regulation for were China and North Korea. And I picked China because it is the bigger of the two countries and it was more prominent, in my opinion. In China, you have to, they have their entire internet system regulated. They can block certain IPs from being seen by their citizens, and they really just, they instituted this thing called the White Paper, which was a document that the government laid out why citizens cannot get access to certain things on the internet, and it dictated why. But I don't think they see it as censorship there. Looking on it from an outside view, we see it as censorship because they don't have as much freedom to access all the information that they want there. But like I know Wikipedia, which is a common source that I think everyone here has used more than once, like that's blocked there because they can't regulate the HTTPS domain that it uses. So I think it really just becomes whether the censorship line, it's kind of like it's like a gray line. You can't really tell when it turns from censorship into regulation or vice versa. I think it's hard to tell there because it's really just, it's hard looking at it from an outside view when I've never, like we don't experience a lot of regulation on what we see, in my opinion.
I noticed the two countries that you picked there, there's a common denominator probably between those two. What would you suggest that is?
I think it's the government regime. I think we could dictate it down to China has a socialist government, and I believe North Korea has a dictatorship, as what we would define it as. And it's really just that the people are controlled by the government, and here in America, the people control the government. At least that's the idea. So I feel like that causes a lot of issues in those countries, and that's why the government is able to regulate so much in those other countries. And yet here, we can say, well, I want to look at cat videos on the internet. You're not going to stop me. So that's what we.
I think Mr. Small was saying those are both what countries? They're both. There's a word I'm looking for. Cuba's one as well. The USSR was one.
Socialist.
Close. Was it communist? There you go. Communist countries. Is that the word you were getting for?
Good job.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about internet regulation. We've talked about it on a macro scale, right? We've talked about China censoring the internet. We've talked about the United States and what it does. We've talked about the FCC. Let's talk about the most important internet regulation we can possibly think of here at LCA. Okay? We have a crack IT staff here that is on top of all things, making sure students are behaving themselves. How do you guys feel about internet regulation here at LCA?
I think that as the school itself, they feel that we need the requirement to regulate what sites students can be on.
Okay.
I think it's beneficial that we're not allowed to get on Facebook or other social media sites because that's distracting from our education.
Okay.
I think that when we sign that document that's saying I agree to not get on these websites, I agree to not put a hotspot on my phone so I can access outside other things, I agree to not use a VPN to get around
Everybody's taking notes,
firewall
right?
here.
Okay, keep going.
I think that when we sign that, we give up our right there.
Okay.
We agree to, I'm not going to get on Facebook here, I'm going to use the school's internet for school purposes.
So the school has the right to regulate the internet on premise?
Yes, on-prem, because when you sign that document away, you say, I'm agreeing to what you want. It's just like saying that in the contract we signed that even though we're 18, we're not supposed to smoke on school
Right.
grounds, or at all, actually. Or if you're employed here, I think the rule is you're not supposed to drink at home.
Okay.
I think this should.
So I know Hunter's stance. Parker, how do you feel about internet regulation here at LCA?
Kind of what he was saying, like if we're on school grounds,
Right.
it should be, but where it, like mainly just use it for academic purposes.
Okay.
Because there's plenty of times where it's been a little too regulated just because I've tried to look something up,
Mhm.
and it's totally like what is this Bible verse? It's blocked. Like I've seen Bible Gateway blocked before.
Okay.
So, but